There's alligators in pretty much every pond and lake that you can think of, and yet I've never had a problem in the past 9 years with a gator. But the cool thing is there's so much more nature
and bears
than you might even realize. There's deer and bear and manatees
there you go.
And hawks and eagles and a whole bunch of kind of things that I had no idea. Every time I go golfing, I see something new, and it's kind of wild to see how much nature we actually have here in Central Florida.
What's going on? It's your boy Fanzo Chery back with another video. As you can see down below, we're doing 10 realities living in Orlando. And this real estate guru person here has a lot of good videos when it comes to Orlando. So let's see if he gets them right. You know what I'm saying? I was raised in Orlando but wasn't born here, but I still feel like I'm the guy when it comes to Orlando and the nice spots. So let's just see the accuracy when it comes to this video right here. So let's go ahead and play this right now.
I've lived in Central Florida for about 9 years now. And I remember before I moved here, I had some pretty clear thoughts of what it would be like living in Greater Orlando. Now with hindsight being 2020, I've got some realities for you that I'm gonna share today. So stay tuned as we talk about 10 realities around living in Greater Orlando. Many times that you might have thought about living in Orlando was when you were visiting the theme park. So let's talk about the realities of that. I remember the first time I thought about moving to Orlando, I was on the monorail over at Walt Disney World. We were going to the Grand Floridian. I'm like, this would be amazing if this was actually real life. Now, it is real life. It's our amenity. We've got the best theme parks in the world right in our backyard between Universal, Epic Universe is opening up. You've got everything going on at Disney.
Can't wait for Epic.
You also have SeaWorld and Gatorland and Legoland and so many other things that come to Orlando that are part of that tourism hub. And so while it's not the only thing that goes on in Greater Orlando, it is pretty cool to have that amenity right here and then be able to get outside of it should you want to. All right, so outside of the theme parks though, although I go there all the time, what else is there to do that actually feels more like daily life for people if that's just not your thing? Because honestly, there's a lot of people that live here where theme parks are not their thing at all, and yet they love living in Orlando. Let's start with outdoor and nature activities. You could go to the springs over in Wekiva Springs or the Rock Springs and take out a kayak, or maybe check out the manatees there. If you want to do boat.
I don't know if that's the first thing that he's talking about as far as at his 10, but definitely do agree that Wekiva Springs, the Springs areas are one of the go-to spots when it comes to Orlando if you're not a tourist, so to speak. Granted, there are some people that are tourists that get their hands dirty when it comes to the Rock Springs area, and it's really cool. It's really dope. So, okay.
You've got multiple different chains of lakes. You've got the Butler chain, the Harris chain. There's so many different beautiful lakes throughout Central Florida. You could come check out downtown Orlando with Lake Eola, ride a swan boat, but maybe none of that stuff is kind of your thing. What about the food and drink scene? We were actually named one of the best foodie cities in the country with places like Mills 50 and Audubon Park with a lot of local places that you could try out. There's also roughly a dozen different little downtown areas from Mount Dora to Winter Park, Winter Garden, and if you're looking for little shops like that to just sort of fill up an afternoon, everything from a farmer's market to little community events, there's something always going on here in Greater Orlando.
Shout out to my city, man.
If you want to keep updated on all the big developments, real estate, and living in Orlando, hit the subscribe. Let's talk about the job market here in Orlando. Now, over the past 5 years or so, we've had really low unemployment. And just this morning, I went on Indeed and looked at how many jobs were actually posted up over the past 2 weeks. There's over 10,000 new job openings, and it was literally everything. So before you start thinking about just theme park jobs, I mean, there are some really cool ones, from dive technicians to Imagineering jobs that are actually really well paying. But beyond that, what else is there here in Central Florida? Of those 10,000 jobs that I saw beyond the theme parks, there are a lot of things like L3 Harris and PricewaterhouseCoopers and KPMG. everything from the aerospace industry and tech industry and a lot of medical jobs.
Lucky Martin.
With so much going on over at the coast as well, you have SpaceX, you've got Blue Origin, you've got NASA, and a lot of that starting to bleed over into the job market here in Central Florida as well. You're only 50 minutes or so from East Orlando to the coast, so it makes sense that we're seeing so many people decide to live here but work over there. And I've said this in my videos over the past 8 years now, that if you are a trade and you are in the Midwest or New York or New Jersey, you're great at tile, electrical, plumbing, any of those kind of things, Central Florida is still really deficient in terms of trade. So whether you want to work for a big builder with the real estate stuff that's going on here, or you want to have your own company, there's a lot of opportunity in Central Florida. When I'm traveling and I tell people that I live in Orlando, many times they say like, oh, home of the stucco box. And I actually interviewed somebody not so long ago, Ryan Young. We were talking about stucco boxes taking over Central Florida between the strip malls and the new houses. But there's a lot of Central Florida that's actually quite old, stuff that's been built in the 30s and 40s that have a lot of charm. There's different downtown areas, like we just talked about in our last thing, of like what to do beyond the tourism spot. But if you're going in these downtown areas, Thornton Park, Lake Eola Heights, you're talking about Mount Dora and Winter Park, there's all of these older, beautiful homes with great architecture that do exist here in Central Florida. And yes, there's also a ton of stucco boxes. So depending on what you're looking for, whether it's affordability and new, or some of the downtown areas with a little bit more charm, Orlando has it for you. But Ken, what about alligators? There's alligators in pretty much every pond and lake that you can think of, and yet I've never had a problem in the past 9 years with a gator. But the cool thing is there's so much more nature
and bears
than you might even realize. There's deer and bear and manatees,
there you go,
and hawks and eagles and a whole bunch of kind of things that I had no idea. Every time I go golfing, I see something new, and it's kind of wild to see how much nature we actually have here in Central Florida. When you arrive over at MCO and you're headed back to your car, there's these big billboards that say beaches of...
Definitely want to have a little disclaimer when it comes to our airport. That place, I always hear it from people that come in, they consider our airport one of the worst. That's the only thing I would say, like, coming into Orlando is probably one of the worst aspects when it comes to Orlando. But that's a little hot take. I don't know if anybody else agrees with me, but I've always heard that, and I low-key kind of agree with what they say.
Orlando, which kind of messes with your head because you think that we have beaches somewhere here in Orlando, but we don't. Yet only an hour away, 50 minutes depending on where you're at in Orlando, you have New Smyrna Beach, you've got Cocoa Beach, you've got a lot of cool things off on the Atlantic side that are just absolutely beautiful. So depending on if you want a little bit more touristy or a little bit more beach town, we've got that for you. Now on the other side of the state, we've got Clearwater and St. Pete. That's just a little over 2 hours away from us. The great thing about that though is that because we are inland, you have access to both, but you're not having to worry as much in regards to hurricanes. And other than some of the downtown areas
we do
that
get
have
the
some
hurricanes.
of the older infrastructure, we don't really have issues with flooding. And because we're so far inland, the wind has pretty much died down before it hits us. So that's one thing to consider about living in Greater Orlando. Another reality about living in Greater Orlando is that our public transportation needs some work. According to automoblog.com, 95%.
That's another L that we take. Our transportation is trash. It's getting better, but it's still trash. I'm talking about down to the Lynx bus, down to the city. When it comes to local movement, it's horrible. It's horrible.
People that live in Orlando have a car, and the average Orlandonian has about a 28-minute drive to work. Maybe you think that's a little bit short or maybe a little bit long. Let us know down in the comments below. But there's other things. You look at pedestrian traffic here. It's one of the more dangerous places to walk. And according to niche.com, Mills 50 is the most walkable place in all of Central Florida to live. And if you go up and down Mills 50, there's a ton of cars. And yet I think what they're talking about is the live, work, play situation where you've got a lot of restaurants and bars and things to do nearby neighborhoods and kind of all of that stuff together. So thinking that through, there are a lot of walkable neighborhoods that are similar to that maybe don't have as much traffic, like a Baldwin Park I think about, or a Winter Park, or Sanford even, Mount Dora. There's a lot of downtown areas that have lots of shops that you can walk to, but then you have to drive back home. And so unfortunately, Orlando is really car dependent. We have almost $500 million of investment in our roads going on right now. So they're trying to keep up with the growth that's happening, and yet we still have a few years until we really feel the positive effects of all that infrastructure. I know when you think about Orlando, you probably think theme parks, and so you might not automatically think arts and culture, but we have a lot of that, and it really is becoming a part of who we are as a community. Yes, we've got the Dr. Phillips Performing Arts Center, we've got the Orlando Museum of Arts, we've got a lot of other really cool organizations that are permeating kind of everything that we're doing as a city. You've got Creative City Project with Immerse, which is a multi-day event with hundreds of different artists that come in from around the world. You also have United Arts that's doing a lot of things for placemaking, public art, cultural tourism, and arts education here in the Central Florida area. And so if arts is your thing, there's easy ways to get plugged in here in Greater Orlando. Hey, did he wag his tail? Is that a thing?
Like he Zola.
So another myth or reality, I would say, is that Orlando and Florida in general is a really cheap place to live. The reality is it's actually not as cheap as you might think. The average sales price for a single family home here is
Not at all.
around $500,000. But there are some savings that you get beyond just the no state income tax that Florida has. There's a cost of living comparison study done recently that showed that Orlando is 35% less expensive to live in than New York, 41% less expensive to live in than Washington, D.C., 12% less than Miami, 8% less than Chicago, and 48% less expensive to live in than Boston. So while Orlando is not as cheap as many people would think and would hope with all of the things that we have going on here, it is significantly more reasonable to live here than many other major metros across the country. You might think
That's
that we
good to
don't
know. I
have
didn't know that.
seasons here in Central Florida. It's not true. We've got blazing hot, hot, and then not as hot, pretty much throughout the year. Now we've got 230 days of sun here in Central Florida, which means we got about 100 days where it is going to rain. And that's typically in the summertime. If you're gonna visit us to see what Orlando's like and the good weather's like, check us out between like February and May. That's really probably the best time in my opinion. That's right before the summertime hits and it rains for like an hour every single day, and well before the hurricane season in October, November. So while it's not snow and leaves falling, we do have a lot of seasonality here in Central Florida. He almost just kind of like blends in. It looks like just one of the pieces of the lights. There's so many pros and cons to living in Orlando. Like every major city, we have our problems and we have our opportunities. And yet there's no place in the world I'd rather call home than Greater Orlando. So if you're looking to do the same, or if you're looking to buy or sell a house anywhere in Central Florida, my team and I want to be your real estate resource of choice. So make sure you reach out at theorlandoreal.com/YouTube to get started. We'll see you guys on the next video.
Dang, I really thought he was gonna give it like number 10, number 9, number 8, number 7. But in all reality, Orlando is a good spot to live at. It got beautiful people. It has amazing food. It has an array of different things, whether you like being outdoors or indoors. We got theme parks, we got beaches, just like he said in the video, in all honesty, from the good to the bad. But if you like this video, please like, comment, and subscribe for more things like this. And I can't wait to see you on the next one. Peace.